That down. Let's move on to this, shall we? You know, we talked last week about, or maybe a couple weeks ago now, that Warner Brothers is officially basically splitting itself into two different companies. The one company is going to be taking things like their television assets, things like TNT, CNN, a lot of the other, we did the big laundry list of all the networks and all that kind of stuff that will be going with them. And they'll be taking along with them most of the overall Warner Brothers debt will be going along with them. On the other side, you're going to have the side that David Zaslav will continue to run, which is going to be the studios and HBO Max. And one or two other things as well, but basically that's the studios stuff and then basically the network stuff being split into two different companies. There is a theory out there, Rob, that while most people agree this second company with all the networks, they're going to be looking for somebody to buy it once they've split it off. But there's also a prevailing theory out there that some people believe they're even going to be trying to sell the Warner Brothers studio side. A theory which I do not subscribe to. I think they're doing all this to put the studio side in a much healthier place. But there are those out there who believe they're going to try to sell it as well and to make it more attractive by dumping all the out-of-date network stuff out and just have the actual valuable prime stuff. Warner Brothers Studios, HBO Max. There's a new rumor floating around out there, and I stress the word rumor, okay? But hot on the heels of that theory, the predominant theory out there that Warner Brothers is going to look to sell, there's a rumor floating around like this one saying Sony rumored to be considering Warner Brothers Discovery streaming and studios acquisition. And I thought, well, I don't believe this is real. That's why everybody's emphasizing rumors. I thought it would be interesting for a second for us to talk about what would be the pros and cons of Sony buying Warner Brothers, but then also as an opportunity to talk about, let's say theoretically Warner Brothers and HBO Max was going to be for sale. Who might be the most logical suitors? So let's start with Sony. The most obvious advantage with Sony is that they don't currently have a streaming entity. Sony announced at CinemaCon a few years ago, we're a theatrical movie company. We're about movie theaters. We're about making content and putting in movie theaters and then selling off our content to the highest bidder in the streaming market aftermarket, right? They were like, we don't want to be in the arms race. We want to be the arms dealer. We want to make the product that everybody's fighting for, right? But that has left them in a place where they're the only one who doesn't have a streaming network. Could you imagine being Sony saying, well, we don't want to build a streaming network. How would you like to have HBO? That's got to be an attractive carrot, man. That has got to be an attractive carrot. That's like dangling pictures of boobs in front of the chubby high school virgin kid. It's like, yeah. I mean, it's got to be very attractive. Very attractive. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Rob got a flashback.
Flashback. But I mean, it's got to be an intense thing. And listen, with all the talks of, Sony's financial, the reality is they have a lot of money in the bank. And the other reality is, mostly due in part to the AT&T driving it to death's door, the market value of Warner Brothers, it could be bought at a fairly bargain price. Still in the billions and billions, but a fairly bargain price nonetheless. Sony also presents a fascinating possibility, Rob. What's the one comic book character Sony has the rights to?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man? I'm just throwing this out there. Can you imagine a world?
Yes.
We're so... Yes.
Well, then you could do the old comic book Spider-Man.
Let me air the thought, though.
Go.
Can you imagine a world where Sony buys Warner Brothers and they now own DC, because that would be part of the package. They now own DC outright. It's not just the rights to it. They own DC. And then going, we never did very well trying to make that Sinister Six thing. What about Spider-Man meeting a new rich benefactor? I don't know, maybe a Bruce Wayne. And what if we have a Spider-Man Batman thing? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't know this for fact. I'm going to go out on a limb that the contract that Sony has with Marvel, with them having the rights, probably precludes Sony from crossing Spider-Man over with other comic book universes. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm going to go out on a limb and bet Marvel's lawyers will probably have the foresight to put something like that in. But that aside, that would present a very, very, very interesting proposition that he could come along and do that. Anyway, let's stick on Sony for a second, because that's the company being ruined. And by the way, the other thing that Warner Brothers Discovery is keeping are the video game assets.
Yeah.
And for Sony,
huge,
right?
Yeah.
With PlayStation, like Sony then acquiring more video game properties in another studio, that could be attractive as well.
That means like the Arkham, games could just be PS5 for a while.
Oh my God. Can you imagine how much Sony and the PlayStation executives would be drooling over the idea of being able to launch, their own branded Arkham titles? Mm-hmm. Anyway, guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. Guys, one of the things that's really frustrating to me is that there's still a lot of stigma around men's mental health, but it should not be that way. Men are expected to always stay strong, keep it together, provide, perform, and yet over 6 million men in the US experience depression each year, and many go undiagnosed. It's okay to admit that you could use some help. Real strength is being able to say, I need to talk to someone. That's where BetterHelp comes in. With over 35,000 licensed therapists, BetterHelp is the largest online therapy platform in the world, having already helped over 5 million people. And it's super convenient. You can join sessions from anywhere, whenever it works for you. You can even switch therapists anytime at no extra charge. And the results speak for themselves. BetterHelp has a 4.9 out of 5 rating on the App Store with over 1.7 million reviews. So guys, if you're feeling the weight of the world, don't carry it alone. Talk it out with BetterHelp. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can connect you with mental health professionals who understand what you're going through. Our listeners and viewers get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Campea. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Campea. Rob, sticking on Sony for a second, what would you see as the pros or cons for something like Sony maybe acquiring a Warner Brothers?
Well, it's funny, Sony, before it was Sony, was Columbia, and Columbia was on the same lot as Warner Brothers when they called it the Burbank Studios, and then they moved. But in terms of, look, do I want to see studios combining? I don't. I mean, I think I know it's a function of the modern age, but I think one of the real problems with all of these larger companies acquiring the movie studios is that they really don't understand the movie business. They think they do. And they come in, they get involved in it. They think they're going to be able to leverage their debt the same way they could with other things. But I would really love to see like what the filmmakers did who got together and bought the Village Theater in Westwood. I would love to see some consortium of people that wanted to focus on making movies buy these studios, because, Warner Brothers still has a very functional back lot, and their sound stages are some of the best in
they're world class.
World class. I know, and there's a lot of companies now building sound stages in LA that seems counterproductive, but the conventional wisdom is they're buying them so eventually they can rezone them for residential.
For commercial, residential.
Yeah, for commercial, and do something, which is whatever. But I mean, I think that Sony buying Warner Brothers, I could see that happening. I just don't want to lose another studio. I don't like these mergers happening. Although, under Disney, 20th Century is just starting to do some its own. The trailer for the Bruce Springsteen film dropped today.
Yes.
And that was a 20th Century Studios movie.
And is Badlands not also 20th Century?
Yeah, that's and that Killer of Killers is 20th Century. And Steve Asbell, the president of 20th Century, started, and they're making some original films now. But I think it's important that we need different studios to make these things. But I think all the things that you pointed out makes Warner Brothers a tasty target for Sony. But I mean, what would that mean? Would that mean that the Warner lot would get sold off and they would move all over? They'd move over to Culver City. I mean, what would they?
I know. I bet Sony would want to keep that lot.
I would hope so.
They would. I mean, if you buy Warner Brothers, one of the juiciest pieces of the steak.
But if no one's shooting here, we've got to bring the business back to Los Angeles. I mean, we killed it over the course of decades, but I mean, I do think that it's important. But I wish Warner Brothers could, I don't know, these companies that want to, it's all Gordon Gekko.
And again, and for the record, I don't think Warner Brothers is going to sell. The main reason I don't think they're going to sell is because you and I have been in the room with David Zaslav. that dude is a passionate movie fan.
Yes.
You know, like you can think what you want about ability. What you can't question is this guy has dreamed of, you know what he is? You know who he is? He's Seth Rogen in the studio.
Yeah.
Maybe as talented, maybe not as talented, but that's who he is. He has grown up a passionate movie fan.
But he makes less mistakes than Seth Rogen does.
Yeah, maybe. But and he gets to be in the movie business.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think they're going to look to sell, but it is possible. Okay, let's look at let's say it's not Sony. And let's say they are, again, I don't think they're going to sell, but let's say they are. There's a couple of other key players here that you could then look at. One of them that I think would be very serious is NBC Universal Comcast, right? Because Comcast always seems to be looking to expand, and they always have, it's seemingly limitless amounts of money as a studio. NBC Universal Comcast, they currently do not have a foothold at all in the superhero world. And so that would be an interesting thing for them to add as another dimension to get into that. Another, and I'm going to run through these quick, then I want your thoughts on who's the most likely. Another big one would be Apple. I've said this before. Apple continues to double down on being serious about developing their studio and developing all this stuff. They, of course, got F1 coming out, which everybody's really excited. Could finally be their first bona fide hit.
And who's releasing it?
Who is the distributor?
Warner Brothers.
Oh, Warner Brothers is their distributor. That's right. So it's an Apple production. They have more than enough money to buy Warner Brothers 100 times over. So they could buy it and not even notice it in their bank account that they bought something like that. And it would give them a whole new studio infrastructure. It would get them a lot of studio talent. It would just completely open up a lot of avenues for them. So that's why I think Apple would be an interesting suitor as well. But of course, the juiciest morsel on the plate would be Disney. Why? Kind of the same thing as this Sony thing. Can you imagine one company owning Marvel and DC?
Welcome back, James.
You want welcome back. That's what the whole deal would be called, the welcome back James deal.
Yeah.
It would suddenly make the one thing I've always said never going to happen. Justice League versus Avengers. That movie ain't ever going to happen. Disney buys Warner Brothers. Oh, that movie's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That movie will definitely happen. Now, of course, there'd be a lot of other hurdles. I think a Disney purchasing Warner Brothers and like Marvel and DC being owned by the same company is something that would have a lot of government eyebrow raising for, you know, for consumer protection and all that kind of stuff. But setting all that aside for a minute, I don't like the idea of Disney buying Warner Brothers. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think Disney right now is particularly in a big acquisition place at the moment. I don't think they can just throw around a lot of money like that at the moment. But you'd be naive to not admit that that's the juiciest possibility. Sure. People would love that possibility. Out of all of them, to me, I do think Sony makes the most sense. Again, NBC, Universal, Comcast, if they want it, they'll put up the money. If Apple wants it, they'll more than be able to put up the money more than anybody else. But all things considered, I think Sony kind of makes the most sense. Out of all the other potential suitors, who do you think makes the most sense?
Amazon.
That's a good one. That's when I left off. You're right.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. Because Amazon MGM, you know, after seeing the Amazon presentation and knowing that Sue Kroll from marketing and Courtney Valenti, you know, she was at Warner Brothers for decades. So was Sue Kroll. Have them come back home, that lot. Already Warner Brothers distributes half of MGM's classic catalog anyway. So it's, as a matter of fact, I mean, I just watched the new 4K of High Society that Warner Archive put out this week. And, you know, they would have a studio lot. They would have the history. And even though Sony really controls the old MGM lot, for MGM to come over to the Warner lot, there's plenty of room. And it's a place, I mean, Amazon planted their flag and said, we are committed to theatrical. They have a banger slate for 2026. And they've got franchises like the James Bond franchise, which, by the way, Warner Brothers is now releasing. You know, they put out the Connery box set. So I could see Amazon. It seemed to me from their presentation at CinemaCon that I thought was the most impressive, that they have the most interest in really diving into the film business because, they had their Amazon studios that put out things like Manchester by the Sea. And I liked that logo. And I thought Amazon was doing some really interesting stuff, but they didn't, it was like niche titles. They had some great taste, but I think the slate they have for 2026, and it's not just because I want to see Project Hail Mary, but the Don Winslow adaptation, Crime 101 with Chris Hemsworth.
Listen, the Amazon presentation
Unbelievable.
Was one of the absolute best at CinemaCon. I was thoroughly impressed.
Masters of the Universe, that they've got that coming out. So they've been picking up other tentpole properties, and I think they're really committed.
But they're not putting Voltron in theaters.
Yeah, they're not yet.
I still don't understand that, but anyway.
But I think that that would be because MGM, they've got their library, but essentially, and they got the name, but essentially they're a new studio. The Amazon iteration of MGM is new. It's brand new. They've got a lot to offer. They're kind of homeless right now. And the problem with Disney, you still then have to deal with Disney as a company. And there's certain subject matters they're going to shy away from. Amazon will make anything.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about these stories? Now, again, for the record, let me be clear. I do not believe that Warner Brothers, the studio side, is going to be looking to sell. These are just rumors. None of the major trades are covering this, but it's floating around a lot online. But theoretically speaking, for the fun of the discussion, were Warner Brothers on the studio side and HBO Max and their games be up for auction, who could you see as the best potential suitor? Whatever you guys think, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.